Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, January 15th, 2026. Councilmember Hinkle is out, so he asked me to fill in for him. And we've got two items on the agenda. The first one is a discussion regarding the mid-year budget review. And we have Kim here. First meeting as current finance director, budget manager. Somebody's filling in that role, I'm assuming it's you. So thank you for being here. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Kim Kaufman, budget manager, trying to step in for Anthony for the purpose of the Finance Committee meeting. For the mid-year budget review, I have a little packet for everybody. The mid-year budget review serves a few different purposes. First, it gives council a picture of the city's funds after the prior year audit has been completed and allows council to course correct if need be. And then it also asks council the question of whether or not they want to add funds to the rainy day fund or take funds from the rainy day fund. So we'll jump right in with the handout of the city's major funds right now, looking at the general fund. And stop me at any time if you have any questions. I have some cells highlighted here that I want to draw your attention to. So on line 16, this is looking at fiscal year 25 estimated compared to fiscal year 25 actual, which is our audited figures. You can see that revenue came in slightly below estimated for fiscal year 25, but expenses also came in slightly below. We had a lower subsidy to the PSST fund than anticipated due to purchase orders that haven't been paid yet. And so all that comes together to give us an ending fund balance of 11.6 million, which is about 400,000 less than budgeted. And then right below, that was on line 65. Right below that, we see our reserve for encumbrances at 3.5 million. Those are POs that were created in fiscal year 25 and potentially prior that haven't been paid yet. So they're still, they were budgeted for in fiscal year 25, but they're not going to hit fund balance until they're actually paid. So
The expenditures part, the spent less than we're
correct,
expecting.
right? That's the main difference between on line 47, where you see the transfer PSST fund, 2.6 million compared to what we actually transferred to PSST to keep them in the black, 212,000. It's because they didn't spend all of their purchase orders. They didn't fully liquidate them.
The PSST didn't need as much of a subsidy,
Correct.
so we didn't spend as much, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the PSST does continue to not generate enough to cover
That is correct, yeah.
which I know it was always gonna be blended in, but just for discussion's sake, it has obligations and the tax itself doesn't generate enough to cover all of it by itself.
That's correct, especially since the additional 4 SROs were added.
Approved.
Escrows.
With this, you mentioned too that there were some purchase orders that haven't been fulfilled.
Yes, they've been created, but we haven't been invoiced for them yet, or the merchandise hasn't arrived, been delivered.
Roughly, how much is that? Sorry if I missed it, you saying that earlier.
No, you're fine, it's on line 67.
Okay.
So in fiscal year 25 and potentially prior to that, we have outstanding purchase orders that haven't been paid yet. And that's usually like if something's on back order or if we haven't received an invoice yet.
So reserved for encumbrances,
Mm-hmm.
that one,
Yes.
and that's 3.5.
Yes, as of the end of fiscal year 25, it was 3.5.
And as we go through the budget development process, we'll review all of those. And if any of those, a purchase order was issued, but the project's not gonna happen or the purchase isn't gonna happen, we'll cancel the PO and the dollars that were reserved for it, they stay in fund balance and move forward to the next fiscal year available to council.
And you'll see that difference also in columns B and C. B is fiscal year 26 adopted and C is 26 estimated. And when you go down to rows 32 through 38, you can see some jumps between the budgeted figures for those expense lines and the estimated. And those are prior year encumbrances that have inflated the budget to be spent.
So they did have council approval, it was just council approval in a prior budget year.
So supplies and materials by almost $1 million.
Correct.
Services and maintenance by 600,000 or so, 500,000. Capital equipment by almost 2 million. And some of those things cost a lot more. I can see
Right.
some of that. So any other reason, detail?
It mostly reflects just timing. When we thought we were gonna be able to complete the transaction, and it's very common that either projects or capital acquisition, they do string out over 1 or 2 budget cycles. Kim and Clint and I were having a conversation this afternoon as it relates to the capital portion of your general fund budget. And my guess is even prior to the mayor's tenure on council, it was voter approved that 0.7% of our sales tax revenue would be earmarked specifically for capital. And to give you, that's about $18 million worth of general fund revenue that the voters have said, we don't want you to use it for operation, capital only. It's wonderful because we have dollars available to help us achieve the capital needs that every organization has. The challenge when it has a real hard string attached or a real hard earmark is that we have no flexibility on $18 million of general fund revenue. Without that restriction, if your general fund revenue picture was $18 million bigger, you can recognize, oh, yeah, we have a really comfortable budget position. And what we see over time, opportunities that present themselves to council during the course of the fiscal year after budget adoption are often capital in nature. A real property acquisition opportunity presents itself, or a sidewalk project, or there's a grant but we need a match. Those dollars do come out of that. 18 million, or roughly 0.7% of, so there's a good side and a challenging side to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brings us to fiscal year 26, column C, estimated beginning fund balance on row 1. We did adopt a budget assuming we would have a beginning fund balance of just over 12 million. After 25 was audited, we realized it was 11.6 million, so kind of a $400,000 drop there. And then moving down to the transfer section, rows 47 through 55, you can see that in column C compared to column B, our subsidies did increase a little bit because those funds required more funding to keep them in the black. So in the case of the PSST fund, because they were paying on some of their outstanding purchase orders from prior year, they actually required a $1.4 million subsidy in excess of what was budgeted. And then the insurance fund, you'll see on a later page, you'll see the PSST fund on a later page as well, but health claims were higher than anticipated and just 6 months into the fiscal year. So they're already requiring an $800,000 subsidy to stay in the black.
In going through this budget development cycle, what we're gathering early on is that fuel cost, energy cost appear to be stationary or going down. And we have large fleet operation, and fuel and those parts do make up a bunch of our internal service funds that we charge out to everyone. And to see those costs not going up on us is great. What we're hearing from the business community in Norman, those who do offer health benefits to their employees, this morning in a meeting with a handful of different businesses. I heard numbers of our health insurance is going up between 20 and 27% next year. So we had some ideas as to what might be driving that, and we've heard about, federal intervention on the price of prescription drugs. Our company's cranking up that number to get as much in the bank as they can before federal government cap maxes out their revenue opportunity. Maybe we do recognize that even at the state of Oklahoma, the Attorney General's office is doing some investigation into some insurance companies on various types of claims. So there is volatility in the world of insurance. We are self-insured, but we still purchase insurance in the market, what we refer to as the stop loss. So if we incur a big hit, we're capped at what we'll pay out of pocket before a third party kicks in and covers that expense.
Councilmember Bruno?
I remember a prior conversation with staff about maybe doing some prescriptions with Norman Regional. It is a public health entity. Is there any savings to be had? And
So we were 3 or 4 steps down that road, and then there was a large administrative upheaval. It sounds like dust is beginning to settle where we might be able to reapproach. I believe the gentleman that we met, that is the pharmacist for the whole hospital system who administers that pharmaceutical program for Norman Regional employees, was absolutely open to the idea of being able to satisfy those needs of our employees and dependents as well. And they were looking at the mutual benefit of our participating in their prescription program is they would achieve critical mass to allow them to move into a bigger pharmaceutical space that provides better access to their folks and better access to our folks. So before the end of this fiscal year, we'll be able to reapproach Norman Regional now that it sounds like they have a little time to focus not just on putting out a fire, but actually business model.
There is discussion that within 6 months, Norman Regional building an outdoor pharmacy that will be kind of semi-attached to the hospital and everything for general public also, so it would make it easier to get those picked up and stuff.
Yep, that does line up with where we were in conversation prior to the
would it be at a lower
change.
cost?
Yes,
Okay, so better access, lower prices.
absolutely.
All right, let's hope that works out.
But $804,445 over what we budgeted for insurance just in the first 6 months since July.
And what we are seeing, and in conversations with neighboring agencies in the metro, life is better apparently with better pharmaceuticals. Our prescription drug costs are growing, but dollars spent on actual doctor visits and hospitalization are going down. So the drugs do cost more, but if it means less time in the hospital, it probably means more time back at work and productivity. And some of the cities in the metro are telling us they're seeing the same thing. I think a little bit of it has to do with when pharmaceutical companies advertise on television and you say, ooh, I think they begin to self-diagnose, and then you start talking to your doctor about how do I get into some of that. Hopefully the federal recognition that, U.S. prescription buyers were paying more than other buyers in other parts of the world, that, we should be able to receive the benefits of the R&D that took place in the U.S. So it's expensive. We don't see a big improvement in that market space in the upcoming fiscal year, but we're optimistic on the horizon that we'll start to see that curve and go the right direction.
And it still makes sense for the city of Norman to be self-insured.
It does, and we check that annually with our broker, Gallagher, and have them, if we were to buy a shelf plan, generically equal to our plan document, this is the most cost-effective way to do it.
I'll just, I'm glad we're able to cover our employees for sure, but $804,000 over in 6 months, that's enough to fund the shelter for a year. That's enough to fund the on-demand transit service for a year.
And with HIPAA, we don't necessarily know the who, but in that world of healthcare, one employee or one employee's spouse, one premature baby is $1 million. And it goes really, really quickly. Believe it or not, there are healthcare recipients in our system who have annual prescription drug costs in excess of $500,000 a year. And we don't get to know who. We do know some of those prescriptions, and it's life or death. I mean, you take this and you live another day, and you don't take this and you're not with us anymore. So it's a fascinating, expensive piece of the benefits package.
Doesn't sound like a sustainable healthcare system to me, but that's not what we're here to talk about, I
We
guess.
won't solve
But I
that
mean,
on
it
our
does
own.
impact the city, and that's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
To have to, just for that to even be an overrun.
And that for being half the year.
Yeah, and so public safety and then transportation, 40,000, so. Okay,
So,
and we put in a little over $1 million into the emergency reserve.
that's correct. Well, it's part of the reserve of
As
the general
required,
fund, yeah. So that leaves us with, 4.9 million in the ending fund balance estimated in the current fiscal year. 1.6 over the required 3% reserve for operations. And that's what, we'll project for, fiscal year 27 beginning fund balance. And then on in column D, row 3, sales tax, kind of volatile. I'm thinking 1% increase, that's what I have projected here from, current year budget. We can change that, this is just a preliminary, assumption, but if we do that, and then we have a 4% increase in use tax, which we think we can realize, that brings our total revenue down to 110.8 million. But we acknowledge that our dwindling fund balance is an issue. We need to build that back up to a healthier level. So one option we have is to freeze expenses for fiscal year 27 at the current year levels, and that's what I have projected here.
What we describe that as in the budget development process is a rollover budget. And it takes a lot of guesswork out of things to say, yep, what you got last year is what you're going to get next year, and we live within those means.
We adjust mid-year
Absolutely.
You
accordingly,
could always adjust.
or whenever. Councilmember Grant.
So just for clarity, keeping all the things we have and not adding anything else, and this is what it should be, unless something goes really off the rails.
Correct.
Or
And
we
not
get a
having-
windfall.
And interestingly enough, where we see capital dollars coming in from other sources. And just in the past 4 weeks, we're looking at about $44 million in capital funds through ACOG and through the federal government directly. Plus our $18 million annual, here's your sales tax for the 7/10 capital. There's a lot of dollars. What we look at is how much of our staff time do we spend actually working on those projects, and how much of their cost should be associated directly against those capital projects and be funded that way, as opposed to just out of general fund operating revenue. So part of what is going into this year's budget development is a review of all of our capital project engineers and project managers. How much of their time are we coding off to the projects they're working on, which is an allowable, acceptable cost, to make sure we stay on the right track. And a lot of those federal and state grants, they give you this is how much you get to code off for administrative overhead right off the top. And we should absolutely take advantage of the administrative overhead component just to make sure we have the bodies to move those capital projects forward. So very intentional, a little bit volatile, like on sales tax. What we are seeing, and remember where we were, like in fines and forfeitures, which the lion's share could come from municipal court and speeding tickets, generically speaking. COVID happens, we were hesitant to knock on your car window and be face to face with a driver to say, hey, you're speeding. And traffic enforcement like that, it slowed way down, and the revenue for fines and forfeitures dropped off pretty dramatically. That's not really part of the program anymore. Without COVID, we're getting back to where we were pre-COVID in terms of traffic enforcement. And when we think about dollars lost in a community, lives lost in a community, safer driving, it saves the community money long-term and saves lives. So not only is there a benefit on the revenue side, there is a benefit to lives saved and property saved that way too. So a lot of activity. It's a busy budget cycle. It's definitely more challenging when your sales tax isn't growing by 8%, but that's what we're here for.
Councilmember Grant.
And then I was gonna say the projection between column C and D on wastewater. We're gonna be having a discussion in the future about rate increase.
You continue to just keep staff warm and fuzzy with what you have absorbed and what you continue to track. What you'll see here on the revenue side is the franchise fee that we collect from our utilities. And one of the conversations that Kim and Clinton and I had this afternoon, when we issue debt, the bond council will list in the official statement, hey, if you're gonna buy this bond, we want to assure you that the revenues we're gonna collect to make bond payments, we will collect 125% of the revenue necessary to make your bond payment. That gives them the comfort to buy our bonds, and Chris goes out and builds water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure. We watch our revenue picture in those enterprise funds closely to make sure we don't dip below that 125% debt coverage ratio. We told the bondholders we'd keep it. So you'll remember conversations we've had with Reptelis in years past. They review our rate structure and make recommendations on user fees and or connection fees in those enterprise funds. And Chris, is wastewater the next one we anticipate bringing council for review?
It's just staying flat on revenues.
And the expenses,
Decline a little.
yeah, expenses go up. So that would be one we'd bring you with a Reptelis report with a recommendation on a rate increase for the voters to consider maybe November-ish of 26.
Okay, and then the projected income from that you see through comp D through H.
Correct.
Correct, without a rate increase though.
So
Yeah.
that's just keeping it, so with the rate
Exactly.
increase.
Yeah.
So the most recent rate increase we had was in water. And you can see a
And that would be
much rosier picture.
water reclamation, or would be the next one?
Yeah.
You said?
Yep.
Wastewater.
It's like it and sanitation are head and head.
And both have been over a decade.
Yes.
Well, just like on that about the sales tax growth, I mean, I know we get to it on the next one too, but from fiscal year 2019, or let's see, ending in 2021, $6 million in revenue, and then fiscal year ending 23, $7.5 million. That's a 25% increase
Yep.
in revenue over those 3 years. I mean, how practical is it to continue rising at that trajectory in perpetuity?
Right.
So when people talk about flat budgets, we're talking about a flat budget compared to a 25% increase in revenue over the last 3 years.
Definitely flattening
Like,
out
That is the context, and I hear that
in a
word
new plateau.
all over the place over the last many months. Context. Context-wise, our revenue has grown by 25% in the last 4 years.
Yep.
And it cannot, in my view, cannot continue at that trajectory indefinitely. At some point, it levels off. And hopefully doesn't go back down to what
Exactly.
it was before.
And your guess is honestly as good as ours in terms of when COVID happened and this revenue growth took place, we attribute a bunch of that to people not having a choice but to stay home, and they began to shop from home. And they did staycations instead of vacations because there wasn't any place to go. And that did contribute mightily to that revenue growth. And now people are able to shop a little more freely and go on vacation again. So the growth that we do see now is kind of that per capita income as our population is growing. Will we continue to be the second fastest growing city in Oklahoma? To a point, we recognize what our urban limitations are. And it's water quality protection zone and the actual ability to provide infrastructure. So I think through that through the AIM plan period, we have the infill capacity and council's desired density approach to stay there. And our population, we anticipate, will continue to grow at a similar pace. After that infill's done, we'll start to feel pressures like landlocked agencies that do exist out there in the metro, and their challenge will be tougher because it won't be done through population growth. It'll have to be, a different retail mix or a different funding structure for local government that happens statewide.
So we have to make the best use of the property and land that we have.
Absolutely. And of course, council members in different capacities are engaged in conversations through the Oklahoma Municipal League, where they are leading a study and the discussion about how should local government be funded with maybe a little less dependency on the volatility of sales tax, whatever that means. And there's a desire that our ad valorem tax generation from Norman city limits, it grows at a much more steady pace. And some have estimated it's growing 8% a year, and our sales tax may be growing at 1%. So,
All right.
So, back to column B, row 47. I made the same assumptions in the PSST fund that I did in the general fund, 1% sales tax growth, 4% use tax growth, frozen expenditures. And it requires, still with all that said and done, it requires $336,000 subsidy from the general fund. So that brings us to a positive net difference instead of a negative net difference, which we've had the last few years as we've tried to spend down the post-COVID surplus that we've had in the general fund. And you might have heard some of the residents that spoke at Tuesday night's meeting referring to the $7 million deficit.
Yeah.
It's really a spending deficit of expenditures over revenues. And we've had that the last few years, and it was intentional because we had that surplus and we should spend it. But it's getting down to a tight level at this point. So we're trying to focus on building the fund balance up to maybe a safer level. And so this budget puts 1.5 million back into fund balance, leaving us with the 3% reserve and then 3.3 in excess of that, 6.51, 501 to start fiscal year 28. And then we won't see negative fund balance until fiscal year 30, so we have plenty of time to correct or update assumptions to that point. So that's what I have for the general fund at this point.
So you've made adjustments to prevent deficit spending.
Correct.
We can't
Course correcting.
legally pass a budget that spends more, but to actually not indebt ourselves to more than we have. And like you're saying about projects getting paid off, there's projects I think that are almost 10 years old that still haven't had the audit
Completed.
completed from the state or ODOT or whatnot. It's still out there. All sorts of nuances about municipal budget, the ebb and flow. And I feel like my entire time on council, the city was gonna be broke in 5 years. And 10 years ago, it was, if we don't, we're gonna be broke in 5 years by 2020 if we don't do a stormwater utility or end the University North Park TIF early, the tax increment diversion. And we weren't able to get the stormwater passed, but we were able to end the TIF increment early and restore $3.5 million to the general fund. So we found a way then, but I feel like it's always been kind of projected with us that in a couple years, we're gonna have a negative budget if we don't make these changes, and then we usually do make those changes through staff adjustments and council decisions.
It requires management. It's a full-time job. And in that OML effort to assemble a package and really understand where municipal government funding comes in, and there are more rural cities than there are big urban centers. A lot of our smaller agencies, their sales tax rate is in excess of 10% because they have very few retail generators in their community. And what we hear is about 30% of the revenue to their utility funds goes right to the general fund. And we know that many, many years ago, back in the 70s, Norman participated in similar practices. And if we needed capital that sales tax wasn't going to cover, they would dip into the water fund or the wastewater fund and satisfy the capital need. And the voters said, not anymore. And now they amended the charter through a citizens initiative petition. And we vote on all of our utility rate increases so we can demonstrate they are for the provision of that utility and that utility alone. But there's a whole bunch of cities in Oklahoma that if they didn't have a sewer fund or a water fund, they wouldn't have a police department or a park. It's that close.
And that's the point of the 5-year projections, right? It keeps us on track and it makes sure that we can head off any problems before they happen, so we're not reactive, we're proactive. And really, the Municipal Budget Act only requires us to have, on hand, current budget year and prior year's actuals and the one that we're budgeting for. So this is just a best practice and it really helps us stay on the right track.
And that's why they receive the Government Finance Officers Award for budgeting excellence. So.
So if there aren't any questions on the general fund, we can move on to the net stabilization fund, otherwise called the rainy day fund. And really, this just gives you the opportunity to decide if you would like to bring the fund balance of the rainy day fund. Right now, we've exceeded in fiscal year 26, we've exceeded the minimum balance of 636. What am I doing? Hold on. The ending fund balance is $5,032,000, and we've exceeded the minimum by 636,058. I apologize.
So we're over by 463.
Correct. So, no, we're
No,
over
wait,
by
no.
636, yeah. We have, the target, of course, is 5%, and we are 463 below that 5% target. And then the maximum is 7%, and we're 2.6 million below that. So this really just gives you the opportunity to decide if you want to deposit the 463,021 from the general fund to bring this to the target, or if you want to let it, leave it as is.
So staff's recommendation would be, since we exceed the minimum by a pretty comfortable margin and that revenues have been stagnant, we would continue into next budget development under the same philosophy. You have adopted financial policies that lay out the rules by which these dollars would be accessible. So as long as that criteria doesn't meet, this money just rolls along forward and is available for a future potential emergency, a scenario where our sales tax revenue is interrupted for a period of time, or some other fiscal crisis that may jump in and warrant council pulling the trigger to access these dollars.
And based on the 5-year projection, you can see that every year we're projected to exceed that 4% minimum. So
I think our policy also says if the circumstances presented themselves and we did have to dip into this reserve, there's a period by which we have to
Pay it back.
pay it back.
3 years. Yeah.
So we have good policy in place too.
And just before I forget, when you're talking about other cities and their sales tax rate, and there's been that discussion about are more potentially raising theirs by a full percent, so
And-
over 9%.
Yes. Even the idea, and I think in that conversation, they talk about in exchange for an increase in sales tax, they would put a cap on millage for future ad valorem questions so that there's an anticipation future infrastructure needs would be met through that increased sales tax and less reliance on a geo bond question for similar needs. So it'll be interesting to see how that conversation evolves and see if it makes it to a ballot in
Yeah.
that form.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of cities are thinking about different ways to diversify the way they can manage their budget. Okay.
So we can move on to the next page, which is the PSST fund, Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. And just to show you the difference between estimated and audited figures, revenue was about 800,000 low from our estimated figures for fiscal year 25. We did budget a transfer from the general fund of 2.6 million, but we only paid, as you saw on the first page, 212 because they didn't spend all of their capital outlay funds.
Part of that capital outlay was related to the completion of the Emergency Operations Communications Center.
Right.
And then,
we're still servicing the debt on that through the PSST.
that's correct,
Yep, there'll be one
We've got
one more debt service payment next fiscal year, 2 payments next fiscal year.
Right, one left this year, 2 next year, and yeah.
And then we would be able to issue debt through PSST to do fire station number 5, whatever the decision is on. there.
Absolutely, but there are multiple ways to achieve that goal, recognizing with the current revenue picture and the current personnel assigned to public safety sales tax, that if we have the ability to issue debt under under Fund 15, not general fund. However, the debt service would exceed the revenue coming in and there'd be a general fund subsidy anyway. Or another way to look at that is the 7/10 capital sales tax that's allocated 18 million bucks a year. You would just say, put that in the capital budget and over 2 budget cycles, pay cash for the,
Do it
yep, and
and
get it.
prioritize it because it's a voter approved. project.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's how you take full advantage of that 7/10.
Okay. That would be good that's good to know.
So on row 23, you can see there also, this is on the expense section. They only spent $943,895 on capital equipment when they had budgeted 2.3. So I'm assuming they have the rest encumbered. You can find that down on line 43, reserved for encumbrances at the end of fiscal year 25. And they were left with a fund balance of 54,145 at the end of fiscal year 25, and we did not anticipate that they would have one. So that brings you over to column C, current year estimated. On lines 10 through 12, those are increased subsidies from the general fund and the capital fund to pay for their increased expenses that you'll see lower down. And then you can see on line 12, 541,859 is what we look to receive from the school district in SRO reimbursements, but this is less than what was budgeted at 557. We budgeted a 5% increase over prior year, and it was really, the contract only allowed for a 2% increase, so that's the difference there, and then that's what you see projected going out is that 2% increase.
Councilmember Grant?
I was gonna say, on the SR reimbursement for MPS, didn't they pay us less because they had to go pay the county, and then I assume they worked out their budget, and are we back to what they
Oh, not quite back to that level,
The
but it will be about that time for us to regroup. We meet with them annually on the subject, end of January, 1st of February. Well, they're in budget development and we're in budget development.
What was it, was it 700,000 they were paying?
I think
And
that
it
was
went down to 500?
that was the most. It
It
was
was
up to
going
about
up.
712,000. In an early, but the number started out, I think, closer to 450,000 when the original PSST question was asked. And that was the amount equal to what they were paying for their own internal police department. And the decision was made, we won't have a police department anymore and we'll pay you that. And their budget grew and our budget grew.
As we added officers and equipment, and the equipment, grew in costs and so forth.
I would say if, when negotiating with them again, be mindful of the overtime. We do not need a bunch of SROs at different, clustered together at different games.
That particular subject, both in hours of overtime worked and dollars associated with those overtime hours, the last 2 years have been trending downward, and not magically or accidentally, but because of active management. They've made a real focus and emphasis on staying healthy in doing that line of work, and their actual sick leave hours have gone down. And of course, if they're not calling in sick, we don't call somebody else in off duty for time and a half. And it really goes hand in hand. So we'll be able to show you some interesting graphs showing what just a focus on management can do in overtime reduction and sick leave.
Are they going to pay more if they end up using SROs after hours from what is, because I think the contract lays out what the workday looks like, what
It-
we're providing.
Yeah,
It
and a
allows for-
fixed amount, this is how much overtime we have available, and you can use it however you'd like. Sports, graduation, prom, those kinds of things, but when the overtime's done, that's when we're done.
Okay, so anything else they're paying?
Yep.
Okay.
Or we just don't go.
They're not.
Councilmember Ginsburg.
I sat in a PSST meeting when we was talking about the SOR contract. I brought it up retreat as one of my big topics. Had a conversation with the chief and the major about the contract as it is written now currently with Norman Public School System. And we looked at the contract of Cleveland County that they just signed with the Norman Public School System. This was about now probably 3 months ago or so, give or take. And Cleveland County strictly says that they will not work any overtime whatsoever. They will supply less than half the amount of officers. They can be first-year officers straight off training and everything to fill in. They won't work anything over 4th grade level. That way they have the younger schools and the younger kids and everything. And they're making $300,000 more per year than what our current contract states. Our contract, when you add in what overtime should cost compared to how much we're getting reimbursed, it was about a $2.2 million difference in the amount of money on the contract compared to what we actually got reimbursed for that contract. The major and the chief both stated that, they're aware of the overtime and that most of it comes from that SOR, because he said you have 2 home football games for the high schools at the same time in the city. That's about 11 or 12 cops getting overtime that night just to be at a football game on 2 campuses, They said that the school system, if they don't want to pay for overtime, might have to look into having private security events sometimes, and maybe not needing Norman PD unless called, type of events and things like that also, to be able to help curb some of that overtime costs. So that's why I brought it up in the retreat, that I definitely want somebody to take a hard look at the contract and in the renegotiation of that contract to make it, we all love school, we all love the kids, we all love all that safety of the kids and all that stuff like that. But it has to be fair with what you're paying 2 different law enforcements, when we're giving you fully trained officers 20+ years to go in there and do the job they do compared to what the other side's getting.
Fair's fair.
Yes,
This was the first year with the 2 stadiums and home
Yes.
games at the same
Yes.
night, so it'll be interesting to see if they're what that looked like on a
Absolutely.
budget.
And I staffed the PSSC Oversight Committee, and for 25, the SROs incurred about $300,000, just over $300,000 in overtime for the after-school events. And yeah, the contract with the school district does allow them to reimburse up to $165. So the rest was just, you
Out
know.
of our pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that like Major Chad who, or Major Vincent,
Major Chad.
who was, he was over the SRO officers. They just switched that to Jamie Shattuck, but he was doing everything in his power to minimize the number of officers that were providing overtime. But he said there were just no more cuts that they could do without reducing, you know, the quality of the service.
That was the same major that I spoke with as well about concerns and everything also.
So they could hire privates, like we could say after your overtime is used up, you will hit something else up, but it won't be us. 'Cause 2.2 million, you said?
The budget that we was shown by the major and everything is that the whole entire, if you took into account what the whole entire thing looked like for the
Right.
fiscal year with overtime, extra events, just whatever, you know, training cost, all of it. It was about 2.2 million total cost for the SOR program. With a reimbursement, I think it was 450, 550,000, something around that number, if I'm not mistaken.
For the
Without having my
16
notes in front of me on
officers.
it, yeah,
And the one lieutenant, it is just over $2 million and.
exactly. And that's,
For
you know, fully trained police response at all their major campuses.
We have fully funded it. We've filled all the positions that voters approved in it. And yeah, the only thing left for the PSST, as far as I understand, is
Station 5.
is fire station number 5.
And based on council's prior direction, real property acquisition, the inquiry has been made about the preferred location. They're looking at all the response circles, the radius maps, to make sure what was the original preferred location for the relocated Station 5 still meets all that call volume criteria. So we will be in a position to bring council real property acquisition conversations. And in that, apparently, one of our neighboring agencies just recently did a long-term land lease with either a state or a federal agency adjacent to a park, kind of like what we're talking about around Lake Thunderbird, for a 50-year land lease, which would be ideal in this situation. Probably not gonna be able to buy any of the federal property or the state property, but to do a long-term land lease for that infrastructure is the avenue we're currently pursuing.
Okay. And just for reference, Fire Station 5 is the farthest east station out in Little Axe, and it's tired. It needs to be, so, okay.
And then once Fire Station 5 has been relocated and that's completed, the public safety sales tax revenues and expenses are supposed to be absorbed by the general fund.
So Fund 15 will just disappear from future financials after Station 5 is relocated.
I mean, and I think we'll still track it separately as far as account for it as we have a dedicated tax. And even though it is being mixed with the general fund, we would still know this is how much the public safety sales tax generates.
We could definitely have a separate.
I think it'd be good to
Revenue line
always
item,
be
yeah.
able to see where
Needed
it's
some money
at,
for
yeah.
something, you could
Since it is
know
a voter
exactly what was
approved,
there.
and it is a permanent voter approved tax, so.
And so really,
Yep.
so expenses again frozen from 26 levels to 27. And they still require, as you saw before, just over $400,000 total subsidy to be in the black. And you can see that leaves total reserves at $0. So that's a positive budget, that's legal. Anything below $0 is illegal. But on the out years, we do have the customary 2% sales tax increase. We'll just have to see what happens. Moving on to Fund 23, I'm trying to be considerate of your time. All I really wanted to show you on Fund 23 is on the reserves at the bottom, Parks has a negative reserve. So for fiscal year 27, it doesn't look like we're going to appropriate funds for projects so that parks could build their reserve back up, make up that negative. Of course, if we increase the room tax rate, then that'll be a different story, but I just wanted to show you the potential for parks projects out of the current 8% rate for fiscal year 27. Any questions on that?
And everybody can see how much each entity is getting from that room tax currently.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll move on to the Public Transportation and Parking Fund 27. A couple things I want to discuss. They did wind up, after fiscal year 25 was audited, they had total reserves of just over $1 million, and we did not anticipate that they would come out in the positive, so that's awesome. That shows up in the beginning of fiscal year 26 in column C. I have for sales tax a small 1% increase budgeted, and then use tax to 4%. And that brings, for fiscal year 27, that brings them to a level where they don't require a subsidy. But I also want to mention in 26, the micro transit program was added via amendment to the budget, $665,000. I do not have that in fiscal year 27 or out years. I feel like maybe that's a council decision. If you want to add that, it would be paid for 100% by the general fund, so that's why I didn't include that. But that's a decision that you have. But even without that $665,000 for microtransit, they do start requiring a subsidy in fiscal year 28, just because sales tax is not growing fast enough to keep up with the expenses.
And they currently operate from two primary revenue sources, a 1/8% sales tax allocation, and which accounts for our fare box ratio, our local match, and then federal transportation dollars for public transportation. So,
Yes, on demand, I'd say, at least currently, planning for it to be included in there somewhere until council makes a decision whether to do it or not.
Right, it's in fiscal year 26, and then we just have to decide in the budget prep process what to do for 27.
if the sales tax revenue picture improves, it improves for both the transit fund and for the general fund. So that makes it so much easier to
But
administer.
outside of, at least this year, projected outside of on-demand, transit does not need general funds.
Correct.
Correct. Has
Well,
been our
this year-
goal, and we have great
Yes.
transit administrators.
They do require subsidy in the current year. It's 39,000. But next year, if we freeze expenses and take out microtransit, they don't require subsidy. And they actually make 16,000.
And is it possible to, so the only place, well, I guess they don't have to, the revenue collected from street parking around the courthouse. It's been a request from a commissioner about switching to timed parking, like the rest of the street parking downtown around the courthouse. At least until we do the overall
Structures and-
downtown street parking garage, but that's been asked. And so we've talked about how parking revenue doesn't pay for
Enforcement.
enforcing parking. So I wasn't sure if we even account for separately or can what's collected from just the pay stations around the county courthouse.
Do we through Flowbird, do we know which machine collected how much?
Yeah, we can look at that and calculate that.
We can talk about that in CPTC or
Yep, but that would be,
finance too,
yeah,
so.
that would be a great conversation for Steve, because I wasn't even sure what our capabilities were of reporting from that Flowbird system, so that's awesome. And I'll look to Mrs. Walker, in terms of council's decision to change like the formula for paying to park around the courthouse. Is that corrected or adjusted by resolution? What?
Yeah, with the update to the management plan.
Yeah, so we just increased the rate from 25 cents an hour to 50 cents an hour on January 2nd with the start of the year. to help with the expenses and create some more revenue. We just replaced those pay stations around the courthouse, in 2023.
Okay.
Before that, it was 50 single space meters that were all
They'd all have
coin
them.
operated, so we're
So
hoping
yeah,
that that slight increase will help, but we still don't think that the rates in general are where they need to be at 50 cents. It's probably still too low, but there is demand around there if you go look. It's-
Yeah, so they had requested if we could switch it to the hour or two.
But and to answer your question, I think the city manager can, by ordinance, can update the rates and change things we'll get council consent.
Oh,
of course.
absolutely.
But just to answer the question, yeah.
Councilmember Gray.
I know they asked, but I'm not so inclined because there's other street parking that you would park further away and walk in. Like if you go across the tracks, there's parking over by the well. You can park in a neighborhood street and walk in. You can park in the 2-hour, 1-hour areas. So, yeah, I hear the request, but not
is the
so
only-
inclined to grant it.
It is the only place downtown where we charge for street parking. So, and we may end up charging all of it in the future, but, okay, if we can get some information about what is the revenue collected around
We'll
there.
bring you that CPTC.
At least we have some,
Thank
info.
you.
We can talk about it further. Okay,
So moving to the risk management fund, this is probably the bleakest report of all the funds here, but just as we discussed before, the increase in health insurance claims, and for calendar year 26, it was decided not to raise employee premiums, health insurance premiums. I'm not sure if we're going to raise employer premiums, to try to mitigate this issue of rising health insurance claim costs. But in column C, well, actually, I'll start with column A, which is FY 25 actual. On line 41, you can see that we estimated to end fiscal year 25 with 1.7 million in reserves, but we actually ended it with 577,000 due to growing claim costs. So we started 26 with only 577,000 in column C. And the increased claim costs so far in 26 have brought us to a deficit of 804 already, and that's
And that was
on
that.
41,
extra.
the
Yep.
subsidy in the general fund.
And initially, the thought of, the volatility and risk management when you're self-insured, the premature baby, not looking at a report or, in violation of HIPAA, but employees that and work with every day, and we recognize we had a couple pretty lengthy stints in ICU. And what we'll need to verify is that we do have stop loss. And by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year, anytime any of those bills show up, and we know the healthcare billing timeline could be 60, 90, 120 days from the day you're out before all the bills show up. When we hit the stop loss, we go out through the billing process to bill our stop loss carrier, and we'll be able to put some of those dollars back into the system. But that's why we have these conversations, because that thought just recurred to me. Got to make sure we bill for those stop loss penetrations.
And that's actually, that's Clint
You're good, you're
Mercer,
good.
he's our risk manager, and those premiums have gone up as well.
Yep.
Councilor
I'd
Gansler.
like to know when stop loss kicks in, at what number of claims and everything like
Was
that.
it
does it
250?
Click in
I think it's 250,000 we pay out of
per,
pocket.
per event?
Yeah, I think so.
No, like per, one, like you said, one person might have $500,000,
Yep.
and if like that, so 250 per person, and then it kicks in and it pays, does it max out its coverage?
If it is, it's 5 million. It's real big. We pay the first 250, and that coverage pays.
That's what
Big,
I
big.
kind of know what that is.
That projected reserve, the general fund won't be able to do 2.4 and then 4.6 and
Correct.
7.3, all the way to $14.7 million deficit on health insurance
It's,
or risk
at
management.
some point, it would have to be absorbed somehow by either the employer or employee. one.
Yep.
I mean,
Combination of the two is what we
Or
envision.
to split the cost between two,
Right.
at some percentage.
we need some kind of substantial resolution either in the current fiscal year before 27, because you can see everything status quo, they're gonna have negative reserves.
from
So-
You get out of hand in 27 for sure.
From the
quick.
Congress, we need them to do something?
Yeah, that's-
We won't hold our breath.
They made it worse.
We also do pay judgments and claims. And when the city attorney takes you into executive session and there's legal challenges against the city, it's also handled in risk management.
Those we receive property tax revenue from.
If there's a big,
That's how those are paid off, right?
So wrapping up, we have the capital fund, and I just want to show you here again on column A, because we didn't complete every single project that we had budgeted for in fiscal year 25. Instead of closing the year with 30 million in fund balance, we closed it with 70 million, and that's typical because we can only realistically complete portions of capital projects, even though we budget for the entire project. So we start fiscal year 26 with 70 million. And then for the bond proceeds on line 17.
Is that, you found $40 million in Anthony's safe?
It's a really big save.
yeah, bridge bond proceeds,
Right,
got voter approval for a $50 million bridge bond program. That's where the revenue would come into the system, and then it would be assigned a capital project number and build out over the completion of the project. This fund, in terms of the revenue mix, includes bond proceeds and then so that's geo bond type activity plus your 7/10% sales tax revenue goes into here too. So we recognize it as being healthy in that not only did the voters approve the bridge bond, but I mean, just like I said, in the last month, we've received $44 million in funding notifications for transportation projects. So our engineering crew, they're gonna be really, really busy just dealing with the other people's money portion. But we'll make sure we are timely and effective and efficient with the bond proceeds from the bridge bonds. Those bridges, they won't get healthier unless we're really focused in on them, so.
and the difference between columns B and C on line 17, the bond proceeds, the 26,000 is what you see in the other column C, fiscal year 25 estimated, and that's for the 2019 vote. And then moving down to capital outlay transfer, that on line 24 in fiscal year 26, that of course is 27% of the the sales tax revenue, and that's what the general fund receives for all capital outlay. Let me see. Then I have all of the bond projects highlighted here in the expenses, and that brings us to
I think we should, please proceed.
that brings us to subtotal of expenses at 88 million for 26, and ending fund balance of 55.7 million. Keep going. Okay.
Please.
So everything looks good in the capital fund on that side. They are paying subsidies to, as you can see here, and I don't have these highlighted, but the PSST fund 1.7 million for their capital outlay in this year, which increased from the budget because they're paying some old POs. They received some merchandise in the current year that they ordered in the prior year. Moving to column D, fiscal year 27, I just want to show you on line 24, those figures are also 27% of the sales tax projection. And that's what we use when management team has their budget retreat and they kind of fight over that 4.7 million for all of the vehicle replacements, for all the computer replacements, anything capital in nature. They have 4.7 million to spend in all the general fund.
And Tim Powers in IT usually wins the battle because we were all scared of being attacked with some kind of ransomware. So he gets usually funded first and then we battle over the rest.
Councilmember.
quick does 4.7 million go?
We can spend it it's easy to spend that in a fiscal year. When we look at a project like a Jenkins widening and it winds up being $13 million, yeah, we can be-build and pay $4 or $5 million in a fiscal year easily on a single project like that. A bridge, maybe $3 or $4 million, one bridge.
Well, you're talking about the capital outlay figure, correct?
The one that y'all are fighting over.
Yeah, we typically use about half of that for vehicle replacements for all general fund departments, and then another 300,000 or so for computer replacements, and the rest is really what they fight over, and it can be snapped up. We've got capital outlay requests anywhere from 50,000 to 150,000. So yeah, we typically fund not even 10% of the requests we receive.
We do look at, just the price of a fire truck has doubled in 5 years. So the price of a cop car, 22,000 to 89,000 in about 5 years. So those dollars don't go near as far as they used to. But we are relatively successful and aggressive in seeking grant dollars to help fund fleet replacement on the transit side, on the PD side. Lately, we've been getting grants that basically cover the difference between the gas equivalent to a fully electric vehicle. So we can drive a $90,000 EV that really is an amazing machine for the price of its gas counterpart, about half the price usually. And
so then going down to line 65, the infamous available for new projects, huge negative number. That's for new projects, and that's because we have, of the 55 million in fund balance, all of those other numbers in rows 57 through 63, those are all reserves for bond projects. So we can't touch those numbers. We can't touch those portions of the fund balance. So that brings us down to a negative number for new projects. So while we have a healthy fund balance, all those funds are tied into existing projects and then bond proceeds for bond projects.
There is a method to that madness. One, it prevents us from spending the same dollar 3 times, because twice is okay, but never 3 times. That would be crazy. What it does give us is a list of shovel ready. And when we see a notice of funding availability for capital projects, we're able to scour the list and say, okay, what do we have on the books that may meet that? And we'll go after those bond proceeds, which frees up either voter approved dollars or local sales tax capital dollars to be moved further on down the line. So there's a bunch of active management that goes into this fund, and it's utilities and it's public works and it's transit, and we've got lots of people with vested interest in the management of that capital fund.
And you see that big highlighted block in the middle of column C, fiscal year 26. Those large amounts that are highlighted, those all assume that those bond projects are going to be completed in the current fiscal year, but they're not.
And they won't be, yeah.
So that's why you don't see any bond figures in the out years from 27 plus. But we still have negative amounts available for new projects in the out years, and that's because we have current projects that are going to receive funding in the out years, and then we have recurring projects that are refunded in the out years. So all of that can change at any time, but this is what we have in our projections right now. And then the final sheet, if there aren't any other questions on capital fund, is the Norman Forward Fund. And most of our projects in Norman Forward are complete, but I wanted to show you on here that we do have a healthy fund balance. If you go down to line 42 in column C, we're estimating to end this year with 7.7 million. So we may want to add some new eligible projects to Norman Forward to use up this fund balance.
So we have the River Park still out there, and there's ongoing discussion about how to accomplish that project. And other than that, we will have completed or began construction on every project that was approved. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think the neighborhood park project list,
There's a couple after those.
yeah, it relatively vague, and they're not multi-million-dollar projects.
And that receives recurring funding, I believe, and those, that funding is worked into this projection.
Saxon Park is still out there to be started too.
I mean, yeah, I guess a thought on that would be just already approved Norman Forward projects that had to have things cut out of them. Or that, you know, the gymnasium expansion at the senior center, the turf fields at Griffin, the additional softball, baseball fields, redo at Reeves,
And the last year to
cetera.
collect is 2030.
30.
2030.
Yeah.
So yeah, that budget projection takes us to the last year of,
Anytime that council wants us to, we can come up with a list of projects where we thought that could use a little bit more help or further funding on some things that eventually got kicked out. Just tell me when, man, I can get that done in like 10 seconds.
Well, it's not enough to build the 50-meter pool at the YFAC yet, but
Well, it will be
it
eventually.
could be enough to do that
Yeah.
gymnasium. And maybe those fields if they want.
maybe a chunk at Andrews Park at a next year, you know, the next Norman Forward question, so.
But those ongoing, I'm sorry.
Do what?
Does that include those bathrooms you were talking about?
Yeah, Andrews.
Or
The new
even
one was-
Reeves,
would
weren't
be-
there supposed to be a-
At Reeves, no, that's actually in capital funding, so those are separate, but we'll tell you, we're probably not healthy enough to actually, we'll probably need more funding on those to actually build them, because everything we bid, because now we budgeted that at $350,000, we're guessing those would probably be north of that. Everything is, it seems like we always come up short.
Even with the
Sign of the
ongoing
times.
expenses on line 23, 730, 680,000 for ongoing pay-go projects, mostly I think that's for neighborhood parks, and then transfers to the libraries and so forth. This surplus, this fund balance surplus is gonna grow by about 4 million a year. So by 2031, you will have about 22 million in there if we don't find projects for it, so. And that's all I have on the mid-year budget review.
Any other questions or comments about that?
Thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, Councilman Green.
When did you get a list of projects that fund can?
I can have it to you by the next finance meeting if you like.
Okay, yeah.
Love it.
Okay, all right, that's it. The next item is a discussion regarding monthly revenue and expenditure reports.
And after the mid-year budget review, I would just be happy to answer any questions you have on any of the revenue or expenditure reports.
Because it's basically the month of December,
Correct, yeah,
which is October sales tax, October retail sales.
correct.
Yes.
And, you know, it continues, when you look at the city-to-city comparison, it's hard to come up with a pattern, because it's, you know, Norman and Edmond are down, OKC and Moore are up. The state of Oklahoma is down over 5%.
Yes. And if we're tracking ahead of the state as a whole, you know, it shows we're doing all we can with what we've got. I wouldn't ever want to fall below that state number.
And it's super
We can do better.
interesting to me how Norman always really, I mean, there's a clear pattern here and everybody pretty much falls within that pattern. Like on, in November, everybody was up a little bit. And then in January, everybody's down a little bit, except for Edmond. They're kind of usually the outlier, but
Edmond has had a negative month every single month this fiscal year.
We look at Oklahoma City and every once in a while you'll see like a 12% plus, and you recognize, oh, that's actual revenue getting deposited from the NBA championship period. There was a lot of merchandise sold and a lot of visitors and a lot of activity, so hopefully that helped everybody in the metro do a little bit better than we might have done without it.
And then again, it's also comparing to last year's budget. I don't know what Edmonds or Moore's sales tax revenue was last year.
that's worked in here as well.
And then when you look in it I always like the last chart, the unrestricted sales tax one.
Yes.
Shows the last 6 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And so like on the bar chart, it shows that this January, December, that we were down 1.92%. But it's compared to that same month last year, which was the largest sales tax month in the history of Norman,
Correct, yeah.
at least going back 6 years.
Yep.
And I don't think sales tax have ever been this high in the history of Norman. So last December, a year ago, was our best month that we've ever had. And we compared this December to the best month we've ever had, and it was down 1.92%. So someone looks at that and then posts on Facebook, the city sales tax is down 1.92%, compared to the best month that we have ever had in the history of over 100 years of Norman existing. And so again, context word.
Yep.
And so I just really encourage everybody to look at that graph, the Norman unrestricted sales tax, and look at how each month compares over the last 5 fiscal years compared to the 3 prior to that. That was that 25% increase, and how it's maintained at that level, interestingly enough, and not dropped back down dramatically.
Absolutely, and we are at a point now in history where the lion's share of any federal ARPA program dollars, they're gone. They are no longer in the local economy. So we know there were millions and millions of dollars infused in Norman and in Cleveland County through ARPA. Yet that plateau stayed pretty constant, and after all those dollars are spent, we're still at that level.
And December looks like it is tied for the second best month that we've ever had, too, as well, compared to October FY23. So
Kim, does that include use tax or just sales tax?
Just sales tax.
Okay, so the other interesting thing, and I'll ask Kim if she'll prepare such a graph for us for the next finance meeting. When we look at sales tax and use tax, they're functionally the same kind of tax. One of them is just your house is the point of sale versus the brick and mortar. And when we looked at sales tax for the most recent period, it's down. But we look at use tax and it's up. And net, when you add use tax and sales tax together, we're up about $50,000. So that's not bad. We are definitely shopping differently than we have in years past. And boy, if we could come up with the magic formula, we understood exactly what was going to happen going forward, we would write a book and we'd all be rich.
well,
Great.
even though revenues increased 25%, many things may have increased in cost more than 25%
Yeah, Mr. Olson highlighted.
in that same period. Any other comments or questions? Yeah,
I'm
Councilor
just gonna
Dixon.
make a comment on kind of pages 8 through 11. Looks like all of our departments outside of IT are under their kind of budget. So I'm sure, looked like IT had some extra service and some stuff, but everybody was 58% through the year. Everybody was at 57 or whatever on their budget. So that's great job, everybody.
They are sticking with council's leadership. Council has done a great job holding the line. Staff continues to hold the line. We want to bring you that budget that looks a whole lot like what is projected for that 26-27 fiscal year in this report. That's what we're targeting to bring you to make your adoption hopefully stress-free, or at least stress-reduced.
And IT has a lot of really large annual software maintenance payments that they paid throughout the year, so that is usually skewed.
Okay, any other comments or questions about
Thanks for your hard
the
work.
monthly reports?
These guys do a great job.
Thank you very much,
It's not
guys.
easy
Appreciate
just to slide
all
in
of your
that
work.
seat.
All right. All right, then if that's it, this meeting is adjourned.
Excellent.
I just was looking at the
Hey, Catherine, can I